Good. Thank you so much for being here. All right. Hello, everyone. We're going to get started. So, hello and welcome to tonight's meeting of the Brookline Commission for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Community Relations. It is Thursday, September 18th, and it is currently 6:43 p.m. My name is Kevin McKenzie, and I am the Commission's chair. Please note that this meeting is being recorded. We will begin with roll call. Commissioners, when I call your name, please unmute and say here or present. Alessia.
Present.
Thank you. Chi-Chi.
Present.
Thank you. Jessica.
Present.
Thank you. And chair is present, so we have quorum. All right. The next item on our agenda is our land acknowledgement, which I'll read now. As we gather here today, let us take a moment to acknowledge the history of this land we call Brookline. This is the unceded land of the Massachusetts people whose traditions, language, and stewardship continue today through their lineal descendants, the Massachusetts tribe of Ponkapoag. Today, we are living on land that was taken by force. By 1641, the colonists in Brookline had allocated to themselves almost all the land that had been inhabited by indigenous people. Land was not the only form of theft that occurred. Lives are also stolen. Historical records state that in 1675, during King Philip's War, 7 indigenous men were sold into slavery in the Caribbean by residents of the area that we now call Brookline. The 7 men represent part of the early slave trade. Slavery in Brookline continued and grew, but soon those enslaved were African or of African descent. By 1746, enslavers claimed ownership of much of Brookline's land. We acknowledge the theft of land, culture, and lives, and the ensuing enslavement of indigenous and African peoples that occurred here. These early policies set the stage for centuries of systematic racism. As we remember these atrocities, we and the larger town must commit ourselves to address the ongoing inequities that are the result of our history of colonialism and racism. Although we as individuals were not perpetrators of these atrocities, we benefit from these systems. Thus, we must dedicate ourselves to addressing them today. All right, the next item on our agenda is the approval of meeting minutes from our June 12th meeting of this calendar year. Does anyone have any, before we vote, does anyone have any comments or notes regarding those minutes?
Yeah, Kevin, I just had a chance to take a look at them. It said we had a discussion of SROs. Did we have a vote or not in June?
We did have a vote on school resource officers, on a policy recommendation that I forwarded to after a vote and a motion was made. I sent to the school committee, and I can't remember who I CC'd on that email, but I did recommend the thing to the school committee that was voted on.
Because it's not in the minutes.
Okay, that is an important note. That is an important note. So given that, I think it might be best for us to pause on voting on minutes. Because just double checking as a quick scan. Yeah, no, it just says discussed, not voted on any of that stuff. So I think we should pause on those minutes, so they better reflect that, and we can have that on our next agenda item, or sorry, our next meeting agenda. Does anyone have any objections to not voting on the minutes today?
I don't have any objection, and I'm not even a voting member, so I just want
That is
to be
okay.
clear. No, I just wanted to let people know that it wouldn't be, outside the bounds of what other committees, including the select board or boards do, including the select board, to offer an amendment and then take a vote on as amended. If it's convenient to get it done tonight.
Oh, okay. That's a good point. So we could just quickly amend the meeting minutes. So for this one, I will just do it as chair. So I would like to propose a motion to amend the meeting minutes to reflect that a vote. Hold on, let me pull up the vote. I have the note somewhere. Pause it. I think it was a 4, a yes, 0, no, 1 abstention vote to recommend to the school committee that school resource officers not be re-implemented, and if they were to be pursued, to do so with an evidence-based approach. Is there a second for that amendment?
Second.
All right, thank you, Alessia. All right, we'll do a quick vote on the amendment, and then we can vote on the minutes. So Alessia seconded, so Alessia already voted yes through the second. Chi-Chi?
Yes.
Jessica?
Yes.
And chair votes yes, since it's minutes. All right, there we go. So that was the amendment. So given that, do we feel I would like to make a motion to vote on the minutes.
Second.
Alessia. We have a sorry.
Yes, let's go.
I was over eager. Sorry, we have a second. Alessia, how do you vote?
Yes,
Thank you. Jessica, I think you were the second, so you vote yes. Yes.
I was in the second, but I'll vote yes.
Oh, that's okay. Sorry, we were eager. Okay, thank you. Chi-Chi.
I was the second, but I vote yes.
All right, sorry that I missed that. And chair votes yes on minutes. All right, so our next agenda item is, okay, discussion and possible vote on creating a celebration and observation subcommittee. So I will just mention to all of you, this is something that Lloyd and I have talked about as different warrant articles have been created over the past couple years and are in the pipeline. Just to disclose, I am the lead petitioner on one for LGBTQ plus Pride Month, among other observations that sort of, call for the town to have days of observation or celebrations for different events. Lloyd and I discussed and thought it would be a nice idea to have a subcommittee for the CDICR to help the office coordinate with that. And it would also be a way for members of the community who maybe don't want to serve as full-time commissioners to be able to participate in the planning of all events or individual events. For example, Juneteenth would be one where those the lead organizers on that event, even though they aren't necessarily doing it on behalf of a town body officially, as members of a town body, would be invited to participate in those subcommittee meetings and such. And do we have different committees that exist and are staffed by the select board to plan things? The most notable to me that comes to mind is the MLK Junior Day Celebration Committee. But I'm not suggesting by any means that committee needs to be phased out, but should it ever be phased out, right? This would be sort of a one-stop shop where things can still happen in lieu of another committee falling by the wayside or, staffing being a challenge or whatever. So that was the vision behind that. Do any commissioners or our liaisons, you're also all welcome to participate, have any questions, thoughts, wonderings, concerns?
I think it's a good idea. I'm just wondering, I don't think we should just create a committee unless someone is willing to lead the committee. So
I will,
wondering
I should add, I will personally chair that committee, that subcommittee.
okay, great.
I can't remember if my mic is open. It's John.
It is.
Okay, good. Good for me, anyway. Yeah, thanks for inviting liaisons to weigh in. I think this is a great idea, and I'm glad you mentioned the MLK Celebrations Committee and Juneteenth in particular, because those two stand out, as additional to the Indigenous Peoples Celebration Day Committee. So if they are covered by this new committee, should the Indigenous Peoples Celebration also be covered by this new committee, or should that celebration remain, with a committee of its own?
My thinking is that all could be they wouldn't still necessarily be covered. We wouldn't replace them by any means unless the select, since they're created, I believe, by bylaw to exist as committees. But so if that bylaw were to ever change or whatever, or even if the bylaw didn't change, but quite frankly, the select board just struggled to staff a commission or one of those committees due to lack of interest, it could be supplemented. But my other thinking was that the subcommittee could offer our support to those groups as well. And I see Caitlin has a hand.
You're not your mic is
Sorry. And please tell me if I'm not supposed to speak during these
No,
meetings.
you are tonight you are our ODICR liaison
Okay.
stand-in, so please speak.
So Lloyd and I have opposite ends of our opinions on this. I do staff the MLK committee, the Indigenous Peoples Day Committee, which those two are bylaw, right? So that it would take being written out of the bylaws to not have those groups. I also work with BaFin to do the Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage event. I work with schools to do Pride. I am not an event planner, and my job is mostly event planning because of how many groups and celebrations that we do have in this town, which I think is wonderful. But those committees, I'll use MLK, BaFin, and Indigenous Peoples Day, they spend about 6 months of their year planning for one major event, finding vendors, doing PR. I'm not sure that a group that meets once a month would be able to do this. Kevin, I understand the support. I think it would, if there is a subcommittee that's willing to support and maybe do some outreach and assist groups with doing things, I think that might be doable. I just don't see how one subcommittee could take all the celebrations in the town, or even some that aren't already being celebrated,
Mhm.
and really like have the capacity to do that.
Yeah, I think that's a really
That's
good
my
point.
concern, I think.
And my one add-on to that would just be thinking the other vision that we could think of this subcommittee as is sort of like a coordinating authority, if you will, in addition to being a support for those other groups that do it. Because there are many that are planned by non-town bodies,
Yeah.
but we could plug in as well. So I don't think it's a replacement. Think of it as an additional support. I think Jessica had something, and then I see Chi has a hand now too.
Yeah, I was just gonna say the way that I understood it, I mean, given our historical capacity and our current capacity, I don't think that even if it was this commission's whole job to plan all of those events, I don't think we could do it, right? So I was thinking that it would be more someone who would kind of keep track of all the events, support, Caitlin's work in that, and then liaise with the individual committees that have already been formed to run these events. And then if there are new ones that come to be, that we could take the lead in kind of forming a new committee around a particular celebration. Because I suspect that folks are not going to want to join a committee where they're just planning all the celebrations, right? They're going to want to join something that is closer to their heart. So that's how I was thinking that you were proposing this, and I think it would make sense.
Yeah, I think that's a good framing. Chi and then John has a hand. Thank you, Jessica.
Yeah, I mostly wanted to support what Caitlin was saying, that these events are a ton of work. I'm not even on the one for the AAPI Heritage Month. It's a couple of the other Baffin Steering Committee members, because it's so much work. And they've stepped up to do it. I think so. If this new committee is serving a coordinating role, I think that, and different from actually running an event, I think that is important to note. But also, realistically, Kevin, it's great that you've stepped up to be the chair of the subcommittee. But is anybody else going to be on the subcommittee besides you? Because because if not, then it's just basically, I mean, that's a lot more meetings for you to attend, to attend the planning meetings for all these events.
Yeah, that is a fair point all around. Thank you, Chi. John, you had a hand up too, and then I'll read Alessia from the chat after John.
Yeah. Thanks very much. And again, thanks to everyone for, being being a liaison and, having the invitation to speak here. But I do think I have something to offer. I was involved pretty much significantly, I would say, in the origins of the Juneteenth celebration, in terms of encouraging it, working with people who ended up being the ones who made the plans for it. And I'm talking about over a period of years now. And then, trying to figure out issues of where's the financial support going to come from, how should the financial support be allocated, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In my experience, the one major celebration, and I won't leave out the Asian American celebration, Pacific Islander celebration, but let's just talk about right now Juneteenth. The one of what I'll call the big three, and then later I'll talk about the big four. But the big three currently that get a huge deal townwide type event going are those three. Juneteenth, Indigenous Peoples Day, and Martin Luther King Day. And the one that we don't have yet a committee in place for is Juneteenth. And I think that this bid for a celebrations committee, and too bad Lloyd isn't here, or he might want to correct me, but I think I'm right on this. What was at the instigation of this was trying to figure out how we can put more of a permanent stamp on the Juneteenth celebration, so that people will have some certainty that it is going to be supported every year and that there will be some allocation of some funds to it every year, and that we'll hopefully not have any ongoing, misunderstandings about who is going to organize the celebration. And the intention was never to bring it in-house, so-called, by making members of the CDEICR responsible for populating a Juneteenth committee, but rather to have it operate very much like the Martin Luther King Day Committee does and the Indigenous Peoples Day Committee does, staffed by people from the community on a volunteer basis with help from the office, Lloyd's office, and with some sort of allocation of some funding to sort of put in place a reassurance every year that, yeah, you should start planning it, because we're going to make things happen to enable you to once again have it again this year, and there won't be a lot of doubt. That unfortunately, the Juneteenth celebration, I'm amazed at how great that has been, especially given that it would be until after January or February that people organizing that event would be guaranteed that it's actually going to happen and that we're going to facilitate it and we're going to help it to happen. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, and then there's two things from the chat that I'll just read for the recording in the minutes. So Alessia said maybe we need a detailed and specific outline on what the subcommittee would be doing, basically 3 points on its tasks. And Jessica made a note that it's important that this new committee not be seen as taking over planning from community groups that are already doing that work. And then sort of in the spirit of that, I did sort of formalize some language on sort of what the 3 tasks that we could give this subcommittee would be. So the first one would be to support the Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Community Relations, community groups, and the town in planning existing, there you go, events. Support the office, community groups, and the town in planning new events, and serve as a liaison between the commission and existing town boards and commissions, and community groups that plan community events. How do folks feel about that? And I'll put that in the chat just for reference, so I remember how to copy and paste. Oh, that's a typo. I should fix that typo before pasting for all of you. All right, hold on 1 second. There we go. Okay, there's that typo. So I think that would be a nice, and we could on the website that exists for the commission, where we have, well, we need to probably take stock of our subcommittees beyond the Immigrant Advancement Committee that does meet. We could also just note that, again, like this would be the sort of charge of that group to make it very transparent that this is the goal per our vision, to support existing planning, to help support new planning, and to serve as go-betweens more efficiently between the commission and community groups and the other bodies for the town that plan groups too. Advocate. Oh, which one do you think, Alessia, that advocate? So Alessia says maybe add advocate. Thinking that advocate could be support and advocate for the program, and like support and advocate for, I think would work nicely for the first 2.
Yeah, I was thinking just to signal the fact that this subcommittee would be a space where these various committees and groups, some of which, as you said, do not really have an official, sort of bylaws given type of, a sort of position. Just to signal the fact that this is a place, as a kind of welcoming place, which I suppose that's the point of the entire commission, you know what I mean? To just kind of say, we're here to do that, to support you in this kind of work, celebrations and recognitions of these different groups in the community. I just thought that maybe adding advocate next to support in some of them would be helpful.
Yeah, I like the idea of doing support and advocate for. I think that's really good. Thank you for raising that. Anyone else have any thoughts? All right, seeing no new hands or ideas from our commissioners or liaisons, I would like to make a motion to vote to establish a celebrations and observation subcommittee of this commission that would do three main tasks: support and advocate for the Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Community Relations, community groups in the town and planning existing events, support and advocate for the office, community groups in the town and planning new events, and serve as a liaison between the commission and existing town boards and commissions and community groups that plan community events. Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
All right, thank you, Alessia. All right, so we'll do a vote. Alessia, how do you vote?
Yes.
Yes. All right, thank you. Jessica, how do you vote?
Yes.
All right, thank you. And Chi-Chi, how do you vote?
Sure. Good luck with this, Kevin.
Thank you. And the chair abstains in line with my general practice of abstaining event from minutes or a tie. All right. So, oh, sorry, I just muted myself by accident. The next agenda item is just a discussion, and then we have two more discussions after this. A discussion on how our commission could be involved with affordable housing initiatives. And so one area that comes to mind would be things like 40B proposals, where the town and boards and commissions are asked for it to solicit or are offered the ability to solicit in their input and advise whoever it might be on whatever it might be related to that process. That is something that, hypothetically speaking, right, if that's of interest to us, when a 40B is proposed, whether it's before the select board sends the project eligibility letter, we could vote as a body to advise the select board to vote a certain way, or to send a certain type of letter, I should say. We could also then, after that process moves along, when it goes to things like the zoning board of appeals and such, we could weigh in and again give them some advice on affordable housing opportunities. Do any commissioners or liaisons have any thoughts on that matter? And again, there's no vote for this one, just sort of flagging it as something that to see if they're gauging if there's interest for us as a future potential agenda item when relevant.
I'm hesitating because I don't want to be the first to speak, but if if there's no one else who wants to be first, I have a couple of.
I was gonna say, feel free to plant the flag, John. Hold on, let me just confirm. Jessica, Chi-Chi, Alessia, do any of you want to start? Or John, or is John good to go?
Yeah.
I'm hearing no objection, John. Go for it.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. And I have some history with this, which some people may have, witnessed or not. I don't know for sure. I'll give you an example of where this, where you'd have to be very careful in going forward with advocacy and with support. There was a previous iteration of this commission that got involved to the point of co-sponsoring, an event with an organization that was clearly on one side of an issue on which there were competing organizations on two sides of an issue. And then people began to question, well, wait a minute, does this mean now that we are, using the sort of imprimatur of a town commission to take sides in a community, an issue that is going to be decided by town meeting, on which there are clearly competing interests when it comes to what's the best way to go about doing additional housing for Brookline. And so that's where you'd have to be careful. So how can you, as a general matter, advocate for affordable housing, and at the same time not get in the middle of battles over what's the best way to do affordable housing? And then you'd have to also be sure you're not straying from what is the prescribed set of objectives that are meant to be served by having a commission on diversity, equity, inclusion, and community relations. And has it suddenly become a housing advocacy commission instead of a, CDEICR. And I grant that there are obvious, connections between the housing issue and the missions of the CDEICR, but it's not known as a housing advocacy group. I think I've made clear what my 2 points are.
Yeah, I think that's also helpful for us to have in mind. Not just, again, you're not speaking on behalf of the full select board, but as a member of the select board, I think that it's a perspective that other members there might also share. And it's one for us to be mindful of. And again, it's not there's not really a vote or anything, but if it's something of interest, we can come back to it in future, and explore future opportunities. And if it's not something of interest, we can move on from it to the next agenda item too.
I mean, I would say that it's certainly an issue within our scope. Housing affordability is a racial justice issue. We know that the lack of affordable and middle income housing in Brookline certainly has an impact on who gets to live in Brookline, and deal, I mean, we've heard presentations and discussions of how zoning originated from trying to keep quote unquote undesirables out of town. And that we were one of the first communities to have racial covenants. So certainly it's relevant. On the other hand, we are a small commission that has limited resources, and there's a lot of resources devoted to housing by other groups, and it's a very active discussion. So, we want to think about whether we want to use our resources to get involved in something where there's been a lot of activity. I think maybe the way to deal with it is, we do get housing related warrant articles. And if when we do a warrant article review, if a commissioner thinks that a housing related warrant article has implications in terms of inclusivity and equity, that it could be raised in that context.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So one of the ideas I'm hearing is to just, whenever there's housing related warrant articles on the warrant, to always, discuss whether or not we want to have a hearing, and then if we do, schedule a hearing for that. Any other ideas from any folks? Jessica, I see you unmuted.
No, I just wanted to add that years ago, I don't think anybody else who's here today was in the commission at the time. There was a fair housing committee that had, I think 4 members, met frequently, struggled in figuring out how to carry out its charge. But so housing, I know affordable housing and fair housing are not the same thing, but so housing has been part of what this commission has done. But like everything else, I think it requires a commissioner to decide that this is something that they want to take the lead on, right? So, I think it's one thing to look around and see like these are issues that the commission should weigh in on, but then there also has to be the energy from the commissioners, and so you need both. I don't know that we have that for housing right now, right? Like if a commissioner were a housing expert or somebody from the housing advocate space that could bring a lot of knowledge and insight, we might choose what we work on a little bit differently. I also wanted to comment in response to what you were saying, John, is I think it is often our role to get into the middle of things. And we do, right? And we weigh in on things that town meeting is going to be taking a vote on. So I don't know what in particular you were referencing, but I think that is often our job.
Well, thank you. And may I just explain it hopefully a little bit better? This may not be everybody's vision of what the CDEICR is all about. My vision of it is that what are the housing issues that everybody, whether they're Brookline by Design or Brookline for Everyone, would agree on. Well, let's start with a right to housing. And if people's rights are being infringed upon in terms of they're being discriminated against when they go looking for housing in Brookline, just as in other communities, human rights commissions, that's a major part of what they do, is they step into situations where people have complaints of discrimination in housing. But that's not the same thing. Imagine you had someone from BBD, I think everybody knows what that is, Brookline by Design, on the commission, and somebody from Brookline for Everyone on the commission. Would you really want, them battling, for the commission's favor for their, one point of view over another point of view, and then it becoming yet another thing that might divide people on the commission instead of bringing them together on the commission, especially given that it's not at the center of what the CDEICR is all about. And so I would hope that there are housing issues that can be addressed by CDEICR that are more like in the area of whether someone is being discriminated against in housing and whether somebody is being denied the right to housing. Excuse me.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Anyone else have any thoughts on this one, or would we be good to move to the next agenda item?
I do want to address that a bit.
Yeah, go for it,
because,
Chi-Chi.
Because, this is a debate that's also playing out on the national level, where some folks are saying that anti-discrimination laws only should deal with explicit discrimination, when a landlord says, oh, I won't rent to X group. But we know that residential racial segregation, that's just a very small slice of why you have residential racial segregation, why you have people of color not feeling like they feel welcome in Brookline or can afford to live in Brookline. There's a lot of practices that aren't explicitly racist that keep people of color out. And we need, some of it is sort of under the surface policies, and some of it is legacies of discrimination. And I think that, it goes beyond, the explicit, not renting to X group. There have been books written about how zoning and redlining worked and how they play out even today. Like if you look at maps, including of Brookline, how they really look very similar to the Federal Housing Administration's maps from the late 40s, 50s that deliberately excluded or, treated neighborhoods with high numbers of residents of color as red zones versus, undesirable red zones versus desirable green or blue zones. So I do, the commission has a point of view when it comes to these things. And I would think it has a point of view about inclusivity. I mean, it's literally in the name, right? The Commission for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Inclusivity is in the name. And inclusivity does mean welcoming people, welcoming more neighbors, which requires housing.
I think these have all been good points. And the main thing I'm hearing sort of the main thing is on my mind is that if we, as the commission increases our bandwidth, ideally, right, with new appointments, and if this is something that people would like to take on through a subcommittee, I think that would be a good place for them to sort of figure out more of the detailed stuff. But in the interim, weighing in on warrant articles. And part of our later agenda item will be looking at the warrant and, discussing things we might want to schedule hearings for. Would be sort of our way to sort of go about it in the interim. Does that sound like a fair, those are my thoughts. Does anyone have any final thoughts they want to add just for the sake of time, before we move on to the next item?
Yeah, just to be clear, Kevin, I totally agree with that course. I just wanted to sort of have the conversation with John about how fair housing is more than just, rooting out the occasional bad apple landlord who explicitly discriminates.
Yeah, totally fair. Thank you for clarifying. All right, our next item is hopefully going to be fast. So I have been meeting with the chairs and members of other, well, not of other, of human rights commissions for neighboring communities. We actually, a bunch of us just met last night. And part of those meetings have been about trying to come together as neighboring groups that do similar or the same work and try to plan a big community event for residents and community members from across our municipalities to come together to. If anyone is interested in that kind of thing, you're welcome to join me in future meetings of this group. We can connect offline. But sort of just, I've been asked to sort of gauge interest from the commission, from commissioners. I don't need a vote. I just need sort of a gauge of interest of, do we feel like it's a nice idea to collaborate with these other municipalities on something? Sort of the current thinking would be an event involving bringing in a trainer or something like that to help with dealing with bridging differences on important issues, or just how do you deal with people, right? Like when you have different backgrounds and have different opinions, how do you sort of approach each other and still maintain community as opposed to losing community and facing divide? One of the things that's come up is that each of our communities have different needs. Newton and Brookline, for example, are in more of a similar place on issues, specifically when it comes to our communities and the divides that have been caused and helping to heal those divides regarding increased anti-Semitism and anti-Muslim hate in both, again, Brookline and Newton. That's not something that every community that we've been collaborating with. For example, like Watertown has been part of the conversation, Arlington, Needham. So not all of us have experienced that. Cambridge, I think, has been around too. So we all have different demographics, and so we've faced different problems. But the common denominator for all of us has been our communities are faced with growing divides between groups and people, and helping bring people back together and sort of healing those divides after they've been caused. So if that's something that sounds of interest to the commissioners, I can report back to that group that the Brookline CDEICR is interested in partnering. There is sort of a question mark of cost and things like that, which would all have to be worked out. Should there be a cost? There may not be a cost associated, depending on the type of event. But that would also be future agenda items. Anything definite, if we're going to sponsor anything, right, we would be on future agendas. But just sort of to gauge if it's worth continuing to engage is sort of what this is.
Sorry,
Kevin?
I didn't mean to preempt anybody. I'll
Was
stay out
that
of it for now.
was that
Yeah.
Alessia? I think. I
Yeah,
heard?
it was. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So can I speak?
Yes, you can. Sorry.
Okay, sorry. So yeah, I think is two things really. Following on what Chichi was saying, which is I just want to completely support and also stress even more what she said in relation to the notion of inclusion and inclusivity, and the fact that given that it is literally a key element of what we do, so it relates to housing, as she was saying, and I would just remind ourselves that it relates to literally everything that we engage with. So it's this kind of 360 degrees type of concern that, as Chichi was suggesting, is completely not only the kind of formal or the one that can be easily seen and so on and canonized in whatever way, but as Chichi was suggesting, there are plenty of libraries and libraries literally written on how these forms are often completely based, for example, on decoupling between what is written down and what is the form and what actually happens in practice, right? And those things are just as vicious and just as bad and just as about exclusion and discrimination, right? So just want to sort of support ourselves that is literally what the evidence say today, right? And it's not just today, literally is evidence that we've had for a long time. So I just want to remind all of us that, the importance of being cognizant of what the knowledge actually is. And the other point is, given that is the case, the collaboration, especially in this climate, with different constituencies and different groups are actually advocating for human rights and all the different needs that, as you, Kevin, are suggesting are of different communities, I think it is absolutely central for us to continue this conversation and whatever it is possible to do to advance if it is training, if it is development, if it is an event, if it is whatever it is, that really center exactly on this notion of how do we speak with each other? How do we dialogue? How we listen to each other? And really anything that goes against polarization and this kind of heightened conflict that is happening among different communities is absolutely central. So, this work that you're doing and this kind of conversations that you're having, the possibilities of doing something together in whatever form would then come, because as you said, of course, there is need for financing, there is a need for thinking about exactly what and what have you. But I think it gives important signals to the community, right? This conversation and the importance of really staying in dialogue and staying committed to each other and to listening to each other and to working together. I think at this stage, even those signals are absolutely central, because it's about maintaining the conversation, maintaining the community, and understanding that community happens in differences. That a community is a community of differences, because otherwise it's not really a community. It's some kind of totalitarian vision, right? And that's not what a community is. So it just, my two pence on this, and thank you for the work, and this is my little comment on what you're doing, Kevin, and yes, support for that and for continuing in that work. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Alessia. Any other thoughts from folks on this?
I did have a thought. Sorry,
Go for it.
You folks are going to regret me being the liaison if I keep this up, but I think this is I hope this is a good one. Getting back to the earlier discussion of the celebrations, Martin Luther King Day, Juneteenth, and Indigenous Peoples Day, Newton has very lively celebrations of especially Indigenous Peoples Day and also Martin Luther King Day. And I'm just going to stick with Newton for the time being. They have in Newton something we don't have in Brookline, which is a African American church. I mean, there's a church that is a predominantly African American congregation. Combined Brookline Newton celebrations of, in particular, Martin Luther King Day and or Indigenous Peoples Day open up all kinds of additional possibilities over and above what we're used to in Brookline, with our solo act on those two occasions. So I just wanted to throw that out there as a possible area of some very fruitful collaborations that could occur.
Yeah, I think that's a good point too. It's the nice foundation of hopefully what will be a lasting partnership. Okay, in the interest of time, thank you everybody. I'm gonna move us to the next one, which is a discussion about public hearings for fall warrant articles. Right now in the chat, I'm just gonna post what hopefully will be working links to the index for warrant articles, the full warrant, and the explanations of them by the petitioners, which were previously sent to commissioners and liaisons by email. I have gone through myself and identified a couple that might be of interest to us that we might want to schedule hearings for. But first, I just wanted to open the floor to Jessica, Chi-Chi, and Alessia. Did any warrant articles stand out to you that you'd like to have a hearing on?
Well, the obvious one is your warrant article, Kevin.
Yes, that was on my short list too. And that would be one where I might just ask one of you to chair in my stead while I present that warrant article. So just that agenda item.
I guess for the benefit of the others who haven't looked over, it's a warrant article to establish an LG Pride Month.
Thank you, Chi-Chi. Any other thought? Jessica, I see you unmuted.
No, I was just going to say, do you just want to tell us what you thought?
Yeah.
And then if there are any additional ones, we can add on.
So I have, again, I overplanned just in case of things people might be interested. But warrant Article 7, which would deal with amending zoning to create the Clark Road multifamily overlay district. Again, we don't have to hear that one, but if people are interested, in line sort of with thoughts earlier discussed. Warrant Article 9 to create a renter's handbook could be of interest to us. Warrant Article 13, the resolution to consider the older population when determining use of Fisher Hill. a property might be of interest to us. Warrant Article 15, and then Warrant Article 16, the resolution to bring a professional women's basketball team. And again, like I said, I sort of over planned in terms, and I'll put that in the chat since I just read it out loud too. But I sort of over identified, if you will, to give everybody options. But again, recognizing our bandwidth and things and time, right? Like we might only want to hear one or two. And we might send out 4 invites and only get 1 or 2 interested parties as well. That's happened before.
So there was another one that I don't think you mentioned. Oh yeah, you did. Sorry. These are
That's okay.
all the ones that you said. Okay. I didn't
Yeah.
hear 13. That was
Yeah.
another one on my list. And then I don't know if someone spent more time with the materials than I did to be able to like Article 4 seemed to be adjacent to our work, but I wasn't able to spend enough time with it. I'm sorry, no, not Article 4. I'm off one. Article 5.
Is that to dissolve the Human Resources Board one?
Right.
John, do you have an insight for that for that one?
Yeah. I think the naming of that board might be a little bit misleading in that it's really all about dealing with the issues that come up, in terms of employment within the town, and it requires a certain amount of special expertise, and it has proven very difficult over time to get people to serve on the board who have, literally HR expertise, rights of employees, rights of employers, et cetera, how to settle labor disputes, et cetera. And the combination of the difficulty in finding people who will serve and continuing to populate the board, and then to get people to meetings, and then the reality that human resources issues need to be resolved, every day, every week, every month of the year. And they don't necessarily wait for there to be a once a month meeting to be resolved. So it's a board that is weirdly sort of in between a administrative board from within the staffing of town hall, or a open meeting board of the citizens of Brookline. And Ann Braga, the Human Resources Director, is the one who really wants to see us move on from the current way that we have of addressing these issues, which is through this volunteer board.
Yeah, that's super helpful context. Any other thoughts on that one or any of the other items? Right now, I saw there was some, I think both Alessia echoed hearing Warrant Article 13 as well, I think, in the chat too. Chi-Chi, I just saw that you came off mute.
Yeah, on the Clark Road multifamily overlay district, John, am I right? Have you looked at that? Is that like a zoning for a single parcel?
That is a zoning of the Maimonides Elementary School parcel to enable the owners of the Maimonides Elementary School, which has been vacant for a while, to go through with an offer they've had from a housing developer to sell it to the housing developer. It may have actually, the sale, I guess, it may have already taken place. And the housing developer, if they're going to develop the housing, they need an overlay that will sort of get them to where they want to be to develop the housing. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what that article is about. I haven't, and I looked at it. It looked like a single parcel.
Zoning, which was the zoning under which we ended up having this elementary school there, needs some major changes so that what is being sought, which is a multifamily housing complex conversion of the elementary school, they need a different kind of zoning for that to happen. And it's actually the attorney for the developer who is proposing the overlay. That part of it is kind of unusual. In the past, what would happen is that the town would identify its own interest in seeing this go forward and work with the attorney for the developer and the developer as to how to write the overlay district, and then bring the overlay district to town meeting, from the planning department. But it didn't happen that way in this instance, and we don't know yet what kind of response there will be from the planning department, but we'll find out soon.
Uh-huh. Okay, thanks, John. That
Sure.
is helpful to figure out what it's all about. I still feel a little uncertain whether we
Yeah.
should have an opinion on it or not.
That one might be a little too in the weeds for us, which is
Yeah.
totally fine. So I'm thinking maybe we want to reach out to the petitioners of warrant article 13, based on what I've heard from folks.
Mhm.
15, which I am the lead petitioner on, so I'll just deal with that myself. So that would be two different hearings. And do we have any interest in hearing warrant article 9, or warrant article 16? 9 would be the renter's handbook, or 16 the professional women's basketball team.
I would be in favor of hearing 9.
And I'm a co-sponsor in that one, so for whatever that's worth.
There you go.
All right, so we can
It's
reach
mostly
out.
being led by Alec Leibowitz, but
So I can send invites to warrant article 9, 13, and 15 and see who we get back. And it sounds like we might have an easier time with 9 and 15, and that's fine. All right. Given the time at 7:35, the next agenda item is scheduled for 20 minutes. I don't expect us to necessarily need the full 20 minutes right now, in part because this, I think, will be an ongoing discussion that we'll want to continue with at future meetings. But I just wanted to sort of have us start thinking about, like, as we're in this current environment that we're in, with all that's happening around us, right? With the federal government, state government, local government, in terms of DEI, thinking about how we as the commission and Brookline can remain committed to those principles. And then the other thing on my mind for this agenda item is just, what does DEI work look like in the context of increased ICE immigration and customs enforcement in Greater Boston? And having that context in mind too. So just going to open it up to the floor first for commissioners and then happily to liaisons if anyone has any thoughts. And again, we probably won't spend the full 20 minutes on this, but because it will be a continuing conversation as we sort of assess what we want to be doing in order to best support DEI initiatives, given everything.
This isn't entirely responsive to your prompt, but because
That is
there
okay.
aren't committee updates on the agenda, I just realized.
Oh,
I'll just
yes,
share that
this does fit very nicely.
I'll just say that one of the things that the Immigrant Advancement Committee has done in planning for the upcoming legal clinic that's happening on the 29th is to not post the address publicly, and to provide the address when people register for the event. So that's just, one small thing that we've done that probably if we had done the clinic a year ago, we wouldn't have bothered doing.
thank you for having that clinic. It's
Agreed.
really
Yeah,
fantastic
thank
that
you
you're
to
having it.
Caitlin in the office for helping us make it happen. But yeah, I'm really excited about it, and we've been getting some responses. I think we have 8 signups already, so I'm excited.
That's wonderful news. All right. Any other thoughts for this agenda item for now? And again, this is something that will be a continuing conversation, and we might zoom in on more in future meetings.
Sorry, just to add in the context of update for the committee is that earlier this week when we met, we also voted as a committee to endorse 2 pieces of state pending legislation. And that's the Safe Communities Act and the Immigrant Legal Defense Act, which the committee has been discussing for the past 2 or 3 months.
Great. And that again sounds like great. I think a lot of our existing work as a commission relating to DEI has really been happening in that subcommittee. So I'm very grateful to you, Jessica, and all who participate to helping ensure that that is smooth sailing.
Yep.
Yeah, I want to echo that. Thanks.
All right. For now, I'll move us to the next agenda item, which will be public comment.
Oh,
Oh, sorry, Chi, did you do something?
I wanted to say something brief and then
Yes, please
had a
do.
question. Just recognizing and agreeing that with you that, DEI efforts are under attack, obviously nationally, but even locally. As we know, the Office of Educational Equity at the schools was defunded and eliminated. And while folks were adamant it had nothing to do with the anti-DEI threats by the Trump administration, one can't help but think in this current environment that the sort of ugly rhetoric at the federal level doesn't have an impact in Brookline, and in trying to stifle efforts to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so, I think though, I mean, I know we struggled sometimes with attendance and getting people here, but it is really important what we do, and just to have a commission like this and to stand for DEI. The question is, in addition to the fabulous work that Jessica's doing with the clinic and Caitlin with the clinic, there are a couple other events. One just happened this past Monday, Tuesday, the bystander training. And I'm wondering what the policy is if like there's another event and we want to, lend our name as a commission, whether we're able to, what's the process for that?
Yeah, I was actually able to attend that. Thank you for raising that point, Chi. I was able to attend that training, and I was able to connect with the organizers, but also the speakers. So if that is something we're interested in, and I agree, there's definitely some logistics there that we want to think about, and might want to think about further. But in terms of like we as an official town body doing it, I think we as individual commissioners should all attend, if able and when able, any future ones. But I think there is definitely a potential for collaboration in some sense. And again, that's one that I can seek some more advice and guidance on from a combination of Lloyd, Caitlin, John, town council, etc. Just because that's not my area of expertise, but I think it would be a good one. And just noting that in the chat, Alessia agreed with well done, Jessica, and Jessica just posted about the upcoming Brookline United for Immigrant Justice event being hosted by Bridge, Brookline Racial Justice and Equity, or Brookline for Racial Justice and Equity. Our latter language access coordinator will be moderating. So that is exciting. Okay.
I will be there. I don't know if you want me to, I don't know, wave some sort of flag from the commission. I don't know.
Yeah,
Maybe
I don't know
wear your
either.
polo, Chi-Chi. Do you
Oh
still
yeah,
have
if you have your shirt, you can.
Should we make polo shirts for the commission?
We do. I'm happy to share mine.
I was just joking. Do you actually have one?
Oh yes, I do. It's a
I have
navy.
the new updated one.
Oh, I don't have the updated one.
It's tan with the new branding.
Oh, can't help you there. I don't think anybody will recognize it as out of date.
No, that is much as true if they recognize it at all.
Oh, great. Caitlin has some.
Yeah, Caitlin has some. So if any commissioners would like a shirt, you can go get one from Caitlin at the office.
I will get one. I don't know if I'm actually going to wear it to the event. I was just
okay.
kidding.
But it is like I wonder whether we should consider having some kind of a name tag that identifies us as commissioners when we attend
that's a good
certain
idea.
community events. But then I don't know whether we need a process to say, am I allowed to wear this name tag as a commissioner to this event?
Yeah.
No.
John, do you have any guidance? Just by chance, do you have any guidance on us for that? I've seen other bodies do that, but most of them I know are elected.
But what kind of events are we talking about?
Like let's say Brookline Day, for example. Like
Yeah.
I'm gonna go to Brookline Day. Can I wear I'm a CDICR commissioner name tag?
Yeah, I don't see why not. Seems like a friendly thing to do. The handbook offers some guidance on the question of individuals and when they speak, making sure that they do not claim to be speaking for the commission if they are not in fact speaking for the commission. So, if you identify yourself, as a member of the commission, but, stay away from expounding on what the commission stands for on this issue, that issue, or another issue, if it hasn't even been voted on by the commission, that's the only area that would get into some issues, I think.
Yeah, and the only note from the handbook that I have specifically is individuals may attend and speak at events sponsored by outside groups or individuals, provided they do not use their titles to advertise or otherwise imply the endorsement or co-sponsorship of their public bodies.
Right, right.
So
Yeah,
I
that's
guess that
an
would
important
be
one to think about.
a note from the select board.
Yeah.
So I guess the read on that from the handbook is to anything sponsored by the town or the office, yes. To anything not sponsored by the town or the office would be more of a question or a no. All right, any other thoughts? And then we can move on to public comment, which will be brief since there's no real members of the public here tonight. Okay, we'll do public comment then. So the chair will now open public comment. There are 8 participants, all of which are commissioners, liaisons, or office staff. So seeing that there are no members of the public, the chair will now close public comment, which takes us to our last agenda item as meeting adjourned.
Before you do that, Kevin, do you mind if I just raise a question?
Yes, go for it.
I'm as awkward as I have felt for the number of times I've spoken in tonight's meeting. I feel even more awkward about the fact that there are 2 other liaisons here who, for whatever reason, maybe they haven't asked to speak. That's fine, but I do want to acknowledge them. David Hill from the police department and Sasan from the library trustees. And I just want to suggest to the commission that they might want to consider taking up for future discussion. If there isn't an intention to actually ask a liaison, in particular, let's say from the police department, and David Hill, I hope I'm not stepping on your toes here. If there is no intention to ask that person to speak, especially because that's a departmental person, who's on time, on their time, the commission might want to consider then maybe we should make clear that the liaison is to be urged to be present on issues where we want to get opinions or views or knowledge from the liaison. But if there is no intention to offer an opportunity to that liaison to speak or to ask of that liaison any information, then maybe it's not a requirement that they be at every meeting.
Yeah, and I'm actually not sure if it is a requirement that they be at every meeting by like part of their appointment as a liaison, if you will. But what I can definitely do when we send out agendas and schedule meetings, I can definitely stress is if there's going to be something of interest to liaisons on the specifically of us asking of liaisons. And if there's not, they're welcome to attend based on interest or relevance given the agenda items. Jessica, you have something.
Yeah, can we just have as a standing agenda item report back from committees and liaisons? I feel like in the past we've always had that, and that's good to have.
Yeah, that didn't slip on the agenda this time. And that might have been an oversight on Lloyd and mine's part, because we usually do try to always put that on the agenda.
But
unless it's a public hearing.
Sorry.
Sorry, go for it.
But I also want to say that it obviously liaisons should attend when they have a speaking role or when they're particularly involved in an agenda item. But I think it's also good to hear what the commission is doing, right? And to have an opportunity to weigh in a more kind of organic kind of way when it makes sense to do so.
And my perspective too is that liaisons are always welcome to speak. And also I do have to apologize to Sasan because this is his first meeting as our library trustees liaison. And in the fog of my brain at the beginning of the meeting, I forgot to officially welcome and introduce him as our liaison. And for that, I sincerely apologize.
No worries. Thank you. I appreciate you guys inviting me and attending this meeting. And again, it's my first meeting, so I'm kind of curious and learning more about this, your commission. Thank you.
We're super excited to have you.
Kevin,
Thank
can
you
I
for
give
being
a
with
quick
us.
response to that?
Of course you can, Lieutenant Hill.
All right. John, thanks for the advocacy. Kevin has been very good at when liaison updates isn't on, he'll reach out and say, you're not needed for this meeting. But I completely agree with Jessica that I think the liaison role goes in two directions, where it's not only reporting to the commission, but I think it's listening, it's observing, and if there's anything to report back to our agencies too. So, I do appreciate coming to these meetings, and even on days like this where John takes up all the liaison time, it's still good to be here. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
And it's always good to have you. If only you could be a voting
John,
member,
don't
you're always
forget.
for quorum.
John,
You
don't
can-
forget
you-
they can mute you remotely. Don't forget that.
I know they can. Yeah. Well, you could also arrest me before the next meeting, and that'll take care of it. Yeah.
All right, everybody. All right. Are there any final thoughts from anybody before we do meeting adjourned?
Thank you, Kevin.
All right. Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you,
It is
Kevin.
7:49, and this meeting is adjourned. Have a wonderful night, everyone.
Okay, good
Well
night.
done.
Night.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thank you so much.
And a big thank
Bye-bye.
you to
Good night,
Caitlin
everyone.
for standing in tonight.
Thank
Good
you,
night,
Caitlin,
everyone.
as always.
Of course. Good night.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Good night, everyone. Good night.